Welcome to the Ken's 5, cloudy with a chance of learning weather classroom. Bill Taylor alongside the great Stacia Wilson. How are you today?
I am good, Bill, and it is definitely cloudy today.
Yeah, we're changing over, man. You know, the sun was beautiful yesterday. Tuesday was gorgeous too.
Yeah.
But now some changes that a lot of us aren't going to like, because with so many people inside, nowhere to go, you want sunshine to go out and enjoy the parks, enjoy your neighborhood, take a nice walk.
Yeah. And, you know, over the next several days, we have these rain chances, especially tomorrow. So I guess the good side of that is it's also a good time to just stay home, you
That's
know,
a good
not
point.
wanting to have to get out in it. So there's two ways you can look at it.
There's a lot of people congregating at parks, and the mayor got a little upset the other night. In the San Antonio City briefing, he was like, look, I don't want to close the parks, but if people keep gathering in these big crowds, he's going to have to. So try to, again, it's all about limiting social distancing, because I was listening to Dr. Fauci was on the radio on the way in today, and something he brought up, you could be a carrier of this virus and have zero symptoms. That's why it's so scary. And you could be out, you feel great, there's been no change, there's no visible symptoms, you're asymptomatic, but you're passing it around because you're out and about and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, they say that that is, in fact, the fastest way that it's spreading is by the people that don't have symptoms. So, yeah, if you go to the park and you see your friend, just wave from afar.
Exactly.
You know? Just
Call you.
keep your, yeah, there you go.
I want to say some hellos. There's Jacelyn, Crew, and Drake in Floresville. Great that you're here. Zane's in the 4th grade. Glad you're here. Kendall Cook in Bear County. Not Bear Cook in Kendall County. I love that one. I love that joke. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian. There's Sammy out in Moss Bluff, Louisiana. Good to see you guys. Uh-oh, trouble hearing. I think we're okay. Is everybody okay on volume? Everybody hearing me okay? Braden says hello. Boone Elementary. Maddie and Morgan at Timberwood Park.
Jackson Floyd, one of our very own Ken's
I miss
family
Jackson
members.
Floyd.
I miss so many people. Our newsroom is so empty. But
I'm looking
thanks,
at
Jackson.
one person in our newsroom right now, and it's the great Deborah Knapp, by the way.
So there's
Deborah
3 of
Knapp's
us in here.
Hi, Deb. So Deb's getting ready for the big Texas Town Hall. It's going to be live at 7 p.m. tonight right here on Ken's 5 television, and I'm sure we'll stream it right here on Facebook as well.
Yes.
And it's going to be a wonderful 1-hour special about Texas and what this virus means for our state, you know, and the economy, and especially the back end of this when we get out of it, what's going to happen. So should be great.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
All right, we got Evan Wallace in Lavernia, Alicia, Canyon Lake, William in Spring Branch, fellow William, yo soy Guillermo, ¿cómo estás?
Greg Matthews, another Ken's family member, is joining
Greg,
us from
miss
home.
you
Hey,
too,
Greg.
man.
Okay.
Jurgensen's here. So today, I wanted to cover something that, you know, one of the things we're trying to do in the weather classroom, not only just teach the meteorology, but also teach things that affect South Texas weather. You know, you're all going to learn everything about the upper level cap today and what this means, because it can happen to everybody, and it does. But it's a weather pattern that we're all too familiar with in South Texas. We can get into, it's usually about a May, June time frame, and just shut down rain chances for several weeks and be stuck in a pattern where Stacia and I are just saying, thanks, sunny and hot, back to you.
Yeah, it's almost like
it's not going to change.
you think, can we just roll the forecast I did yesterday, because nothing's changed except the date. We could just use that one, right? I'm going to go to lunch.
Exactly. I mean, it's a common weather pattern for us, and it's one that we will see every single summer here in the San Antonio and the entire Texas region, South Central United States. So I want to get into some of the explanation. First and foremost, what it is, the cap. Well, what it does is it prevents air from rising. In general, it is a layer of stable air aloft. Now, we're still talking about, if you remember our atmosphere discussion, we're still talking about the troposphere. This is going to be an air layer several thousand feet above the surface, but still within the troposphere, that is warmer, okay? Because as you move up off the ground, your air should be cooling on that drift up, okay, on the ascent, if you will. But then we hit this cap, and this cap is warm air over the top of cool air. So it's a stable environment where it's really hard to get showers or thunderstorms or even the whole convective process going.
Right. It's like you're just trapped underneath this, basically this little ceiling.
Yeah,
And
good ceiling.
A
Great
ceiling.
analogy.
Think of it
Yeah.
like a ceiling. If you're at home thinking, what are they talking about? Look up, think of it like a ceiling. And it's kind of like, you don't, sometimes, as Bill mentioned, it can last for days and days and days. And then there have been a couple summers where we just had record heat, and that upper level ridge or cap had a lot to do with it. We could just not get a break. That heat was just stagnant and continuous day after day.
Exactly. So here's one way to think of it as the surface, okay? Again, please be patient with my drawing and be forgiving more than anything else. Be forgiving. It's a great quality. So as I mentioned, when our air parcels are rising, we should see temperatures getting cooler as we move away from the surface, and they do. But then there's an air layer aloft, okay? Now I know it looks somewhat like a cloud, but this is going to be our warm air aloft, okay? And this is why we call it a cap, because it's over top and it's just capping the atmosphere. One of the analogies I thought of when you were saying ceiling was a show that was on CBS a few years ago called Under the Dome.
Oh, yeah.
It's from a Stephen King novel. It's a really popular show. Had about 3 seasons, and they didn't expect it. In fact, it was a summer replacement show. It wasn't even supposed to do that well, and it was really popular. Really cool story about a dome over a small town, and nobody knew what it was, and nobody can get in, nobody can get out. Well, that's kind of like this. I mean, it becomes a dome, okay? In fact, when we talk about warm air aloft, one of the things, remember that warm air radiates off the surface, right? And when we have asphalt, concrete, buildings of structure, you know, those all retain heat. Those hold in heat, okay? So what we're looking at sometimes too is what's called the urban heat island. You know, in San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, Austin, all of our big cities in the state will trap all of the warm air in the urban area, in the city, so that you have this column of warm air. So then here come the storms coming in from the west, and they break up over the city. How many times have we seen it where the hill country is getting a line of heavy rain, and that comes into the city and it just dissipates, and it doesn't rain at all?
You're absolutely right. And it'll even look at times like it's still heading our way, and they're predicting for it to give us storms as well, this system. And then it just goes away.
Yeah, it just
You don't get
fizzles.
anything.
You're looking at the
Yeah.
lightning, you're hearing the thunder, and we're looking at it on radar, and it looks impressive, and we could be in a drought situation. That's what this weather pattern does develop into, is sometimes drought condition, because we go several weeks without any rain. Now let's talk about what causes the upper level cap. So we know now that the upper level cap is warm air aloft, okay? Now what does that? Well, first and foremost, a ridge of high pressure. We talked about high pressure, right? And we talked about clockwise winds around a high. You guys remember this, right? And I'm loving the pictures that I'm seeing. In fact, we're going to show some of the pictures that I've been getting in. B. Taylor at kens5.com, or S. Wilson with 2 L's at kens5.com. Send us your pictures and your stories, and we feature that on Fridays. Well, when we talked about highs versus lows, we talked about that rotation around the high is always clockwise, and around the low it's counterclockwise. Well, the other part of high pressure and low pressure, and the differences they bring, high pressure also brings sinking air motion to the surface. So whenever there's a high in the neighborhood and a high over top, that's when we're getting that pressing air motion in an upper level ridge.
Yeah, and I think also probably a lot of you all learned in school, you may be thinking, well, I always thought heat rises. You're right, but in this particular situation, since you have that high pressure system, that pressure is pushing that heat down. So then if that's pushing hot air down, and then you have really hot air at the surface because it's in the middle of summer, it's July, it can get really uncomfortable very fast.
Very fast.
Yeah.
And that's a good way to describe it, because remember, when we're talking about this sinking motion, we're talking about air motion more than temperature. So it's going to affect temperature, okay? Temperature's not affecting this, okay? This is the physics of what that high does, and that sinking air motion, that will compress and heat things up, okay? So typically in this kind of an environment, like you said, we're going to get pretty hot. This is the summertime pattern where we're in July, August, and we're hitting 95 to 100 for several days in a row with no chance of rain, and you look up and there's no clouds going on because there's just no lift, no environment to even produce the clouds, because again, you need that convective process with cooler air up here to get clouds to build and then to eventually precipitate.
Well, back in 2009, I wasn't a meteorologist then, and then 2011, this was a big factor. Those were two of the hottest summers on record, right?
You're right, exactly right.
And this was a big factor in all of that, where we just had, as I mentioned before, day after day of this trapped heat.
Yep.
And I just remember dreading going outside. I was reporting at the time, and so my story would start, I would maybe start shooting around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, hottest part of the day.
Hottest, that's
and
when you're hitting the high.
you know, some summers you don't really remember. You're like, no, I don't. That summer, I remember that summer because I was miserable.
Yeah, you're outside in that heat, and remember, when you're shooting,
Right.
you're carrying all the equipment, you're setting things up, you're getting mics ready, tripod, camera, go time. I mean, it's a lot of work, and man, you heat up quickly, and it gets very uncomfortable.
Yeah, you want to be inside in those conditions most
So
definitely.
I want to point something out too that is very important. I'm going to show you another process, but while we're here with this exact setup and this kind of weather pattern, this can create a very detrimental environment for us as well. So not only can it get uncomfortable, but it can also get dangerous. And what I'm talking about is this. It is the ozone. Oh, that's us. Wait, this one right there. The Ozone Action Day alerts. You're familiar with this in San Antonio and all of our major cities, Dallas and Houston. This will happen every single summer, where the air quality really drops and we start cooking up some of the detrimental gases like ozone in our lower atmosphere. Now, if you were here when we talked about the atmosphere and we talked about the layers, you remember the stratosphere where the ozone layer is. That's a good ozone, okay, because that's what protects us from the ultraviolet rays of the sun. So here's a great phrase, kids. You ready? I love this to explain ozone. Ozone is good up high, bad nearby. Good up high because of the ultraviolet rays being blocked by the ozone layer. Bad nearby because if you're breathing in ozone, it can be very detrimental to asthma sufferers, COPD, any respiratory condition.
Well, and that's why also we talk about smog in cities that have a lot of pollution.
Yep.
Houston, for example, has a big pollution problem. Los Angeles does, DFW to some extent. But that ozone alert, why we put those out is because, especially when you have this metropolitan area where you have all that pollution, and then you have the ozone action situation where that hot air is trapped. Bill, as Bill mentioned, that's why they say, hey, if you have breathing problems, upper respiratory ailments, stay inside those days because it's cooking all those pollutants.
That's exactly right. And so when you have that high sitting over top, mics are not working. Your mic isn't. My mic isn't. Oh, well, that's not good.
No, because you're saying all the important stuff. We got to get Bill's mic working.
It helps if you power it on. Is it on?
It's on now.
Can you hear me now?
Thanks,
Hold on, I think they'll tell us.
That's
Can you guys
Stoops,
hear Bill?
one of our award-winning engineers. We got the best engineer team in the business, and you never saw him shine more than with this current situation, getting people set up at home and doing a great job of it. Okay, my mic turned off somehow.
I do
So you
hear
hear
people
me
saying,
okay?
like, is Bill's mic on? We can barely hear you.
Thank
Can you guys
you.
hear him now?
So you can hear me. I got to start all over. All right, I'm going to erase something. No, I think you were hearing me, just not as well, right? Okay, because there's not a lot of ambient
And my
sound,
mic
but
can
your
pick
mic
you
was
up,
working
yeah.
great. Okay, so now you can hear me better, I hope. And what we were talking about is the condition in which high pressures over top, sinking air motion, the high upper level ridge has brought in our warm air aloft, and we're capping off the environment. So now we're underneath this dome of warm air. And what we were talking about is how that traps in the lower level emissions. So what happens? Now, when you say ozone action alert, right? And we talk about that. This is what we alert, the Ozone Action Day alert. What are you supposed to be doing during an ozone action alert? Well, it's again, unhealthy for sensitive groups. So the air quality is poor. It's unhealthy for people that have asthma. That's a sensitive group. member, a person with COPD, anyone that is having breathing issues, you know, and then beyond that, a sensitive group would be the infants and the elderly, okay? You want to limit your outdoor activities on these days between 2 and 6. Why between 2 and 6? That's the heat of the day. And when the temperature gets into the 90s during this kind of a setup, that's when you see and feel all that bad ozone at its highest peak, okay? That's when it's being breathed in more than ever. So you avoid the high traffic areas. You keep your inhaler handy if you're asthmatic, because the emissions from the cars, the emissions from lawnmowers, even the fumes if you're pumping gas. You're putting those chemicals into the air. So that's why we would always say on ozone action days, try to make sure you're refueling after 6 p.m. before 10 a.m., you know, outside of the heat of the day, so that you're not adding emissions to an already bad atmosphere. Sue Kalberg's here. Hi, Sue.
Hey, I heard you talking about ozone, and I just had to butt in. You know
All right.
why?
Say hi to everybody.
Hi,
That's the great Sue Kalberg.
I had to butt in because you
No,
know,
it's great.
I listen to. You can tell.
That's the scanner, right?
That's the scanner. I
Okay.
listen to the scanner at all times, and when I was
Scanner is for our students at home, police, fire,
Fire,
sheriff departments,
EMS,
everybody is talking to each other. We listen into their conversations.
all the important people, and just now, I mean, like within the last few minutes,
Yeah.
EMS was called to Bandera and 410 for a woman who fell down. She's got COPD. She's having difficulty breathing. She was out, you know, walking or exercise or getting groceries or whatever, and she became overwhelmed and she fell down, and EMS had to go get her. And so when, you know, what you're talking about here, it isn't just some thing in your head.
Right, right,
it's
right.
something that people live with and
Oh,
people
absolutely.
live and die with. And
Absolutely.
So, you know, there's a lot of things you learn in school that you think, when am I ever going to use that? But
right,
ozone and the things that you're talking about, they are important. They do matter in people's real lives because it's happening out on the streets right now.
See that? Absolutely.
You want one other thing?
Sure,
The
always.
next call on the scanner was for a dog park where people weren't following the rules and they were too close together.
See?
So if you're out there in the ozone with your dog,
Right?
follow the rules so you won't
Practice
mess
the
it
safe
up
distancing.
for the
Absolutely.
rest of us. And I know, I got in your space.
Right.
No, you're fine. That's Sue Kalberg, everybody, with the great scanner update. That scanner update brought to you by Radio Shack.
It is incredible how she's able to follow that because
Right.
it's obviously never quiet.
Right,
I mean,
right.
you have all those different law enforcement agencies, all, as Bill mentioned, talking on one channel there. So yeah, it is amazing to me how she can even decipher what's going on.
No, exactly. So this is something, as Sue mentioned, this is practical because this summer, which is only, again, a few weeks away, right? I mean, it'll be another 8 weeks, and we're going to be talking about ozone action days. You know, by the end of June into July, this is when this kind of weather pattern begins. It's every summer. You can just about guarantee that this will be a part of our summer days ahead, as will some ozone action days. If you want, take a look at some comments. I'm going to erase the board and show you guys
Absolutely.
another cool way that we get an upper level cap.
Okay, Christina Mullins said, my cat and I are watching you guys.
Oh, wow!
Christina,
Any
I hope
feline questions?
I hope your kitty cat's learning lots. Lots of cool stuff. Lindsay said, thank you for teaching us. And then we have Susan Cento, excuse me. Summer turns Texas into deserts. Yes.
Perfect.
Yes,
That's
a big
perfect.
portion of Texas is part of the desert.
So we both have dogs, and we've got cat lovers and dog lovers on this Facebook Live family right now. I've got a great little joke for you. It's the theology of cats and dogs. Have you ever heard this? Have you ever heard about the theology of cats and dogs?
No.
Yeah, the dog says, wow, you shelter me, you feed me, you love me, you take such good care of me, you must be God. Then the cat says, you feed me, you shelter me, you love me, you take such good care of me, I must be God.
And their personalities definitely usually reflect that thinking, too.
Isn't that great?
So how different they are. I love that. Also, I was thinking, Bill, when you were talking about ozone action days, I know a lot of you kiddos suffer from asthma. So if that is something that you deal with and you hear on the news when Bill's doing his weather, it's an ozone action day, you know, make sure, as he mentioned before, you have that inhaler with you because it can be dangerous, and older adults too. That's why we always say, hey, Instead of going through the drive-through, go inside if you're going out to eat.
Exactly. Eliminate that emissions. Don't leave the car idling. That
Yes.
just adds more to the atmosphere, especially between those heat hours, because it's always the hot afternoons. The Alamo Area Council of Governments, what we call ACOG, that's who issues the ozone action days. So they'll inform us a day ahead of time, usually by 2 or 3 o'clock the afternoon prior. We'll get an email from ACOG saying tomorrow will be an ozone action day. You might remember they changed the name for a little while. And I thought it was great because it actually talked a little bit more about what it is. It was called an air quality health alert.
That's right.
Right? And for about 2, 3 maybe years or 4, I don't know. But I don't know if they got some research back and people were not paying attention as much as they used to. So they went back to ozone action days. I think it just kind of prompts you when you hear ozone action as opposed to air quality health alert.
Right. It almost sounds like a
little more urgency, right?
Yeah, the ozone action day, especially the way that they issue it with those different graphics.
But it'll be coming, every time. So, okay, now, I didn't want to draw Texas or the United States. Drawing Texas is difficult. We actually did remember that online contest a while back? Like just from your mind's eye, draw the state of Texas. And I remember Deborah Knapp's was perfect.
Yeah.
And I felt so inferior.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I'm a weatherman. I look at this map every day. I couldn't draw it because I can't draw it real well.
Yeah.
That's why this is going to have to serve as Texas. TX.
Yes. Well, and the whole thing is you couldn't look at a Texas map and draw it. You were doing it strictly from memory.
Right.
But Deborah's was
Oh,
perfect.
it was perfect.
On a
She had Big Bend. It was great. The panhandle came out right. I was all over the map. All over the map. I hope you're keeping up. Here we go. Mountain ranges, okay? So let's draw our mountains, okay? And what happens out in the mountain ranges and the desert southwest and western United States in the heat of summer, let's go to June, July when we're talking about this, right? You've got a tremendous amount of heat. I'm going to change colors so you get a better illustration. You get a tremendous amount of heat that is always rising, as we mentioned, right? And so with that warmer air in those summer months, we get a horizontal, and this is a good word for you guys to remember, advection. That's when things are moving, okay? So we get warm air advection from the mountain ranges, the desert west, to move east, okay? And it eventually moves right over top of Texas. So sometimes we can produce an upper cap and you don't see a big blue H anywhere, do you? There's no high pressure going on. This is a horizontal move or advection of warm air aloft. Because again, if you take the United States, right, and you picture from west to east, we're going downhill, okay? As you go west in the United States, you're going up in elevation. So when this warm air rises and it's up higher, it's coming in. Now, of course, it's maybe not going directly west to east like this. Maybe it's more of a motion like this. But either way, it's still coming from such a higher elevation that it drifts over Texas and then creates our warm air cap aloft, right over top of us. And again, stopping the development of thunderstorms and even any kind of convection.
Yeah, and you've probably heard people talk about, there's higher elevation and it's affecting them. It causes a headache. I know I had a good friend that went to Colorado, really got
Mile
sick
high,
to
sure.
this day. Yeah, blames it on the higher elevation. It really can affect you. So
Oh, absolutely.
if you ever travel west and where the elevation's higher, you may notice.
Hydrate.
Yeah, most
Hydrate
definitely.
up. I mean, that's the biggest key. I remember when we visited Canada years ago, my wife and I were told we had gone for a hike on the mountains and they were like, water, 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 or else it's going to really get you. And so we were overdoing it because that's a big thing when you're changing altitude. We're just not used to that.
Yeah.
Here in South Texas, we're a lot closer to sea level. And again, you get out to these areas and it affects your body. You ever see the people that work out and they change the altitude by wearing those masks?
Where do you work out? No, I have never.
You've never seen that?
I've never even heard of that. Yeah.
You'll see people put these masks on to change altitude to get a better workout, to condition their body for working out, like you say, in Colorado.
Yeah. Well, I do know that, and also athletes sometimes will train at higher elevation levels because it's harder to work out there, as Bill mentioned, gets you more in shape. I didn't know there was a mask you could buy and just
Yeah.
do it at home.
Yeah, I've seen it like where they wear a mask and just somehow, change what your body, then your body thinks. You're tricking your body into thinking it's at a higher altitude, essentially.
You can probably save a lot of money that way. You don't have to get
You don't
on
have
a
to travel,
plane,
right?
Right. You just get a mask. So that sounds like a good plan.
Right.
Oh, we just heard from Shelly. She says, I get headaches when I go to higher elevation. Yeah, it does. It can affect you physically.
Yeah, air pressure, always, lowering air pressure, because when you're moving away from the surface, air pressure is dropping. Remember, when you go into an airplane, they have to pressurize the cabin so that it equalizes and you're not going to feel the change in that pressure as you're getting up to 30,000 feet in the atmosphere.
By the way, Cynthia's watching with her dog. So we have pets
See,
watching.
we've got pets watching. 4 out of 5 dogs choose Cloudy with a chance of learning. And 4 out of 5 cats choose Ken's 5. We're going to get those promos on the air today. It's that 5th cat we worry about.
Okay, so this is a good question from how do they know in advance that it'll be an Ozone Action Day? And I
Great
guess-
question.
Well, and you had talked about they issue it the day before,
Right.
but how did they determine it?
So they'll look at factors like this. They'll look at the meteorology of what's happening in the atmosphere, how it's behaving. So if we're getting warm air moving in from the west, or we talk about the high pressure taking over, and then if it's not too humid, okay, we have to have some pretty dry air at the surface, and then we'll start getting temperatures 90 plus, okay, because it's only dry air that will warm up to 95 plus. When they say, oh, well, in Phoenix it was 115, but it's a dry heat. It has to be a dry heat to get those kind of numbers, because here's what's happening. When you have more water in the air and it's humid, there's more evaporation going on because there's more water in the air. Well, evaporation is a cooling process. It'll cool the air around you. Okay, that's why when you get out of the water or get out of the shower, you jump out of the pool, you're freezing because there's all that water on you and it's evaporating rapidly. And when it's doing that, it's making you shiver because it's so cold. It's a cooling process. So they know that, okay, we've got a hot day ahead with dry air in place. We're going to probably hit a high of 95 tomorrow with a high pressure dome over top of us. Yeah, we're going to cook up a lot of bad ozone in the afternoon, so that'll be the email to us. Ozone Action Day coming tomorrow.
And then we let you know. And also, when you were talking about this earlier, I was thinking some days, regardless of whether I've checked if it's an ozone act, let's say I'm off from work, right?
Right.
And I walk outside, you can just feel it sometimes. And
Big
obviously,
time.
right, I'll know about the weather conditions in my head, but I'm like, I bet it is. Yep. Sure enough, because that air feels stagnant and you feel like it's harder to breathe sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And remember, the air is heavier with high pressure. I'm pointing because that was the high earlier, even though I don't have it here. But high pressure is what makes the air heavier. That's when you have that sinking air motion and it's a thicker atmosphere in the troposphere. It's funny when we were talking about the dry heat, and I just saw Joe Reinagel walked into the newsroom. One of my best lines came from Joe, and I use it all the time because he said, yeah, it's a nice dry heat. It's 120, but it's a dry heat. Yeah, so's my oven.
He has a point.
Yeah, that's a pretty dry heat too. But yeah, dry air, not only with heat, but even with cold, is more comfortable. It's when it's a humid cold that you really kind of feel that bone-chilling wind chill. But it's when the air is dry, cold, even 45 degrees outside will feel better than when it's 45 degrees and it's 90% humidity. That
Right.
wet cold, like that's where I grew in northern New Jersey or in Boston. The Northeast gets a very wet cold. Oh, because you got the Atlantic humidity.
I love the days where you have the low dew points, so low humidity, and it's clear and crisp, and the sun's out, and you have that cooler weather.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to happen a whole lot here. Once that sun gets, we're going to start to warm right up. You don't have a whole lot of sweater weather in San Antonio and South Texas when the sun's out and it's dry.
Exactly, exactly.
Because then you're going to need to take that sweater off. So, but I do, those are my favorite types of days.
Right.
Where it's just nice and cool and crisp. We don't have a lot of those. We do get a few. So,
We get a few. We get it
yeah.
for, what, like a week every year, right?
My
Wait,
sweaters.
this was a mild winter that we're
Yes.
coming off of, right?
Most definitely.
Very warm winter. I mean, we had little quick bouts, but not a big, like, cold spell, really.
Yeah. And it seemed to be a lot shorter. I feel like around this time
Isn't
last
it?
year,
Yeah.
March and April, we were still having days where we could wear some sweaters.
Yeah.
But no, it definitely went by really fast.
Now, this Friday, cold front will cool us off. Saturday, we're probably going to barely get out of the 60s. So it will be a little bit cooler on Saturday with this rain event. And again, that's going to probably be some of what we talk about tomorrow, because we've got the threat of severe thunderstorms tomorrow evening here in San Antonio. In fact, all of South Central Texas is under the threat of severe weather Friday afternoon.
And then also just some questions coming in from you all. Michelle Romero, Santa Fe snow felt wonderful compared to our wet cold in San Antonio. Obviously, we hardly ever have snow here, once in a blue moon. But that, yes, because it was a dry cold out there. I love this question. Ellie Hoffel wants to know how cold.
Hey, Ellie.
Hi, Ellie. How cold can it get in Texas?
Well, that's a great, here's a trivia question for you.
Yeah.
It can get very cold in Texas. Remember now, if we go up to Amarillo, if we even go to Dallas where Stacia grew up, it gets very cold every winter, right? But in San Antonio, since we're not too high above sea level, our temperatures are fairly, you know, they can get cold, but it's not going to be brutal. So my trivia question for you, what is the coldest temperature ever recorded in San Antonio, Texas? Do you know that answer?
I don't know.
That's a good one. See if we get an answer in there.
Yeah.
And I'll look also at some questions. Have we got anything else while you're...
Okay, yes, we have some good questions here.
William wants to know, has there ever been a whole summer that was cool? Absolutely. I mean, like an entire summer that stayed below normal. You know, late fronts can come in. I see you, Joe Reinagel. What's the matter? He just wants attention. This is what Joe does. Joe knows the answer to that question. What's the coldest? The question is, what's the coldest temperature ever recorded in San Antonio? I didn't see your joke. Susan had a joke. Can you find that, Stacia?
No, I'm looking for Susan's joke. Bradley.
Ellie! My niece Ellie up in Pennsylvania wants to know how cold can it... That's Ellie. Oh!
Okay, so that is your relative.
I did say hi, Ellie.
You did.
And her little sister Reagan. My
I thought
sweet
for a second,
babies.
well, does he know her? And apparently,
Yeah.
You didn't know that you knew her, but you do. In fact, you're related.
No, we're blood.
Yeah. So Vera Carr guessed 10 degrees.
10 degrees is a good guess, but it's incorrect.
We have a lot of dogs and cats joining us today.
I told you,
Snoopy's
4 out of
joining
5 cats prefer Ken's 5. It's science. It's not even, it's science.
Curtis asks us this: why does it rain in one place and stop, and then starts again on the other side of the town? So, and
Pretty
this
good.
is interesting because
Rain clouds.
yes, and you have scattered showers, meaning those showers are scattered. I'll never forget, I was doing traffic one morning, and I would look at a few traffic cameras, and it was just pouring on 281 at the quarry, and then I would look at 1604 Bandera, not a drop. The roadways were totally dry. And so I did my traffic report, and I said, you know, this roadway has a lot of rain, but this one doesn't have any. And then Paul Morales came on right after, and he said, well, Stacia, it doesn't rain everywhere at the same time. It was just the funniest thing. That's just not how it works.
Right.
Now, if you have a huge system, obviously you can have a vast area that gets a lot of rain ones.
Which is going to be what we got. You know, tonight, tomorrow, Saturday, everybody's getting rain.
Yes, and lots of times that we just have scattered showers where you just have a little bit of a shower over here, and then so they're scattered.
And sometimes you'll have that scattered or even isolated shower, and it'll be sunny, like next to, or sometimes you'll get the sun and you're looking and it starts raining where you are, that one isolated rain cloud's over top, but it's beautiful sunshine within eye's view. And I love what it's always referred to as liquid sunshine. That's what you call those little isolated showers in the summer.
See, I do not like sunny rain. When I say
Right?
sunny rain,
Sunny rain.
I need to run because it's going to ruin your hair.
Wasn't that your nickname in high school?
Sunny rain?
Yeah.
No,
Well.
I think it was Space Jet.
All right, Joe Reinagel, give us the correct, wait, let me see if we get one more. 10, we got the teens, we got 15. We got 3 rescue dogs that are listening because they are being lazy, lounging on the couch at Paula's place.
I know, right? He does have a couple dogs.
All right, Joe Reinagel, what is the answer? The coldest temperature ever recorded in San Antonio is?
0.
What's that?
0.
0 degrees Fahrenheit. Correct. Joe Reinagel is right.
Thank you.
0. We've never been below 0 in recorded weather history. I always make sure to preface or qualify it because we haven't been keeping records but for 125 years, 130 years or so. And so we all know that, you know, the Earth is a lot older than 150 years. So
that's the coldest that we have it recorded. I do remember that now. But Paula, I love this. You're absolutely right. You have a very good point. Sunny rain means rainbow. You're right. You do get a lot of rainbows with that sunny rain, and those are always enjoyable.
So now Ellie knows how cold it gets in San Antonio, Texas. It has been as cold as 0 degrees. I know it gets a lot colder where you are, Ellie. In eastern Pennsylvania, they get real cold and a lot of snow up there every winter. But now Reagan says, her little sister is 4, and Reagan, my niece, says, chugga chugga choo choo.
Oh.
Yeah. So let's draw that now. No. And chugga chugga choo choo, right back to you, Reagan. I love you. My sister Lindsay up in Pennsylvania.
Oh, hello to Bill's family in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely.
He talks about you all a lot. And we also
Pleasanton, it's raining.
Yeah. Well, looking at the radar earlier, you definitely had a few scattered showers, but it was south of Bear and then more east. But for the most part, you know, we did have initially the potential for more severe weather today. And they had changed that to tomorrow.
Right.
So that looks like it's going to be a bigger day where more of you get rain.
Yeah, the difference maker tomorrow is the cold front. It comes in tomorrow afternoon in the evening hours, and right along that front, that's where you always get that trigger for thunderstorms. And we're in an environment with a lot of moisture. We've got what's called wind shear, which means as we move up from the surface, wind speeds are increasing. Okay, and sometimes you even have what's called directional shear as I look at these arrows. So it means that the winds are changing direction at very high speeds as you move up in the altitudes, right? That creates what can be a tornadic environment. So there is a slight chance that tomorrow afternoon storms produce an isolated tornado. But the first threat tomorrow, winds, hail, and then the possibility of some flash flooding, okay, before we have the possibility of isolated tornadoes. That's kind of the order of importance.
Okay, so Jeff Anastasio, who is a
Jeff
former...
Anastasio, talk about missing
Yeah.
people.
And
He was one of the rock stars that launched this digital center you're looking at.
Yeah.
Miss you and love you, Jeff.
Jeff, you are a digital rock star. But he said, hey, y'all, because, you know, he's from Texas. Although, he said, sometimes in Colorado, we get weirdo tornadoes that move from northeast to southwest. Does that ever happen in Texas? Miss y'all. We miss you too.
It can. Most times they move northeast. That's going to be like 80% of tornadoes, right? But there are the occasional that will do just that and just completely break the mold and drift southwest. But the weirdo tornadoes are reserved for Colorado because weirdos like Jeff live there. No, I'm kidding. I love you, Jeff. Miss you, man. Jeff was a huge member of the Ken's 5 team and went to Dallas and then out to Colorado and living his best life. Good to hear from you, bro.
Oh.
All right. So tonight it is going to rain, Zarik. Absolutely. And so keep that in mind. But again, keep the weather eye and download the Ken's 5 app for tomorrow's weather. We've got to keep a close weather eye on the sky tomorrow because it's important that you have a radar in your hand. And remember, we will be live here, especially on Facebook or on Ken's 5, depending on the situation, to make sure we keep you ahead of any kind of threatening weather for tomorrow.
Terry May told us, he says, it looks like you all are in a storm shelter. Well,
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the camera shot. Yeah, you're right.
it does look
With
like
that, especially with that red light over top. It's ominous. And there is some spam over there, I think, on the table.
No, see, that's the thing. We would definitely need a bigger supply of spam.
Oh, yeah.
If we were in a storm shelter. And maybe some Diet Coke. I don't
Diet
know.
Cokes, that'd be
we're
nice.
limited on supplies.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for our Thursday edition of Cloudy with a Chance of Learning. Stacia Wilson, thanks for joining me today.
Good
This
to be
was
with you.
tremendous. We had Jeremy Baker on solar energy yesterday. It went fantastic.
Jeremy is a genius. All right, but I do have one more question because I
got
think
it.
this is something that we say
From
a
one
lot.
of the cats. I knew it.
Okay, I know, but okay. So they said when we talk about a slight chance of rain, just how much is slight? And that's a good question because
question.
we mention that all the time. So we're like, slight chance of rain. Well, how much is slight?
20%.
Yeah.
You know, 30%, I still use the word light. Once we get, or slight, once we get to 40% is when I'm saying like decent, and, you know, or 50 to 60%, now we're a bit more likely, okay, that the chance is going to happen. And remember, we're kind of combining. You know, a lot of people always ask too, is it probability? You know, that you're saying there's a 70% probability that it's going to rain out of a 100% probability? Or is it 60% of the area is going to see measurable precipitation? Or, you know, and 40% is not going to see any rainfall? It's a combination of both. Because when you talk about a 20% chance, that's more probability than coverage, okay? But it also includes coverage. And then when you get into 80%, I mean, you're talking about 80% of the area. And that's why like 70 to 80%, those are our rain chances tomorrow and into Saturday and even Sunday.
Yeah.
70 to 80% through the weekend.
Those are very strong chances. And also keep in mind, even with 20%, we say that and we say slight because I've had a 20% chance where it did not look like anyone was really, and then boom.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember thinking, no, because I just really had downplayed it. 20%, there is a slight possibility, but a possibility is a possibility. That's why we share it with you.
Always. Always. Hey, thanks for taking some time to join us here on the Interactive Classroom. We'll be here again tomorrow. Make sure to get a picture or weather story in that we can share with everyone on our Fun Time Friday, which I'll tell you ahead of time now, we're probably going to reserve some of it for the weather because we're going to have some active weather come tomorrow. That's going to wrap things up from us. So glad that you were here. Make sure again to see us on First at 4, Eyewitness News at 5, 6, and then our big special coming tonight, the Texas Town Hall on the coronavirus.
Don't
I'm
miss
Bill
that.
Taylor.
I'm Stacia Wilson. It's good to be with you.
Take care, guys. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Okay.